Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and if you're here with us today, this is the final time slot for State of Our World with Richard Christopher Lowe, and myself, both of us broadcasting to you live from Singapore to the rest of the world. And if you are with us now from Facebook, you could go to the Platinum platform. The Platinum platform, I don't think you can see this, but the Platinum platform in Facebook group. Once you search that, you will be able to find us in the Platinum platform, Richard and myself. And if you are looking at Facebook now, and if you would like to go to YouTube, go to youtube.com/c/talkaboutlife. youtube.com/c/talkaboutlife. If you'd like to go to Facebook, go to the Platinum platform. And that's me, Viki Esther Chang, and my co-host, Mr. Richard Christopher Lowe of the UK, but has been residing in Asia and Singapore for the last 20 years. And it is 10:52 p.m. Singapore time on a Monday evening, and 10:52 a.m. America Eastern time, which is America New York time. How are you, Richard? It's been 2 weeks since I last met you. How's business, Richard? And tell us about your
Well,
business.
it's great to be back. I've actually been traveling a little bit, which is the
Oh,
first, pretty much almost the first time in 2 years. So just across the water to Indonesia, but it's nice to get away for a little while. But business is booming at the moment. The real estate markets are really hot. So yeah, business is great.
and Richard, for those of us who are tuning in for the first time now or at recorded video, tell us about yourself. What company are you representing? A little bit about yourself, a background, and your company. Yeah, tell us about where people can find you.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Oxford, England, but I've lived in Asia now for 29 years, the last 27 years here in Singapore. I've worked in the real estate and finance industry now for the last 14 odd years, and worked with a company called One Global Property Services. And we specialize helping clients access overseas property markets, particularly places like the UK, Australia, Germany, Portugal, and really help them add international real estate to their investment portfolio, make that journey as easy as adding any other recognized asset class.
Yeah, and Richard, would you like to tell people where they can find you and where they can find One Global Property Services?
Yep. Well, our website is www.ogpsglobal.com. That's www.ogpsglobal.com, or they can email me at Richard Lowe, Lowe is spelled Lowe, at ogpsglobal.com. And yeah, give me an email or a buzz, and I'll be delighted to share with you how we can grow your wealth via well-researched overseas property investments.
Yes, and back to the show State of Our World. And why State of Our World? I think this is a show where Main Street people talk about our world. You hear about global leaders, you hear about political leaders, you hear about the Fortune 500 leaders, you hear about Elon Musk. But I think our opinion matter too, right, Richard? Our opinion as Main Street people, we want to have a stake in our future. We want to talk about it. We want people to hear us. We want to make our voices heard. And I think we do make a difference in the social media, particularly with the technology that we have right now, that people can always tune in. I invite some of the ministers to my show. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, they don't want to turn up because they don't want to turn up. Um, you know, because social media is a powerful tool, Richard. Not only it goes and continue on for perpetuity, it goes global. and anyone can actually just give their comments, rightly or wrongly, you like it or not. People have their say, and people are made up of their culture, their upbringing, their education, their context, their class, their education level, their mindset, their attitudes. And would say, with that in mind, it makes it so much more important to have diverse voices out in the social media. Not only the social media is made up of the Kim Kardashians, but people like us who want to make known, even with very people may think that these are humble opinion, but I think to us, our opinion matters most. So we've talked about Richard. We've talked about the Ukraine impact. We've talked about inflation. We talked about the supply chain. We talked about how the food prices are affecting us. We also talked about the uncertainties for investors. When things on one side of the world does affect another side of the world because we get more and more interconnected. We talked about that also. We talked about and today we're going to talk about prejudice. We're going to talk about equality, and where we stand. And we also had some of guests who sat in your absence. We've got Lois Bernice, who is an author of three books and is a successful entrepreneur herself on as an event manager, as a CEO of a company, Lowe Creative Services, right there in Savannah, Georgia. And we also have um, uh, okay, it slips my mind. We also have Colette Laurie Galea from USA, California, who talks about Me Too movement and how the Johnny Depp and Heard case right now is affecting the Me Too movement. And my question to her the last time was, does this case set back Me Too movement? And that was the question I asked her, and she gave very interesting answers. I asked her if she's a witness, will she take the stand as a witness to face perpetrators? And she told me no, and she gave me the reasons. So that's a very interesting and intense and real talk we had last week. And tomorrow we're going to have Colette again, ladies and gentlemen, on Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard and her take on it herself as a victim of as an abuse victim herself, and of course her mother too, um, as an abused victim of domestic violence. We'll talk about that tomorrow, but today we have, it's such an honor to have you, Richard. We're going to talk about today's topic, state of our world, equality and prejudice. Where do you stand? Um, and I like to take about 5 minutes to talk about this topic because it's something that I feel very much in my heart. What is equality? We've talked about that during, I think it was such a big deal before the pandemic because pandemic kind of like took over the headlines, and now the news of the war take over the headlines, and then you've got some news that comes out is going to take over the headlines, right? Um, but pre-pandemic times, there is a huge online movement. Not I won't say movement, but a huge sentiment in America and also in Europe that talks about equality. And of course, there is on one side of the aisle, equality. People would say, well, are you talking about equality of outcomes, meaning socialism? Should we have to dish out payouts to people? Should we dish out unemployment benefits? Should we give equal education and free education, free healthcare, etc., equally? That was one of the argument on the extreme end from some of the political pockets in the US. And of course, on the other side of the pockets of the US say no, because we are going to the very dangerous grounds of socialism. And of course, you're talking about a continuum of different kinds of structures in the world. On the one hand, you wanted it to have equality. On the other hand, no, you should not have equality, but you should have equality of outcomes, which is how Singapore is based, and which is the tenet of capitalism. And I would like to talk a bit about Singapore to our international audience. And I think I've got a lot of international followers in my Facebook and on my YouTube and also on podcasts who comes from different parts of the world. They're tuning in from South America, they're tuning in from Africa. And I think people do have respect for Singapore, rightly or wrongly. But I would have to say that Singapore is built on a tenet of giving each child an equal opportunity, giving them the equal baseline to start the race. I mean, students are given education at a very compulsory education, mandatory education at the age of 7, and then you're given as much investment by the government and by taxpayers. I think Richard knows investment in schools, classrooms, air-conditioned libraries, wonderful infrastructure, high school, the vocational institutes, the pre-universities, colleges, universities, you name it. I think an X percentage of GDP is set aside for education, for the younger generation. And I would say that that's the way out of poverty. I would say that that's one of the many, many ways. Entrepreneurship is another way, but that's one of the structured manner that you can lift up poverty if you can equip a child with education and skills. And I would think that equality in opportunity, as much as I see in Singapore, has succeeded in lifting up my generation and probably your children's generation. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're very blessed in Singapore that the government truly values education. And I absolutely agree that one way to elevate yourself out of poverty is, first of all, having access to education. Having an educated mind is a valuable asset in itself to help navigate the challenges of life. But yes, obviously through education, hopefully you're then better equipped to provide value to the economy, to an employer, potentially your own business as well. And absolutely, I think it's a key component of any government to do their very best to provide that platform so that the population can be well educated.
Yeah, and I wanted to, yeah, Richard, let me continue. And I wanted to bring that in because I've lived in France for 7 years, and before that, I lived in China, in a communist country. Before in my first job, I was there for 6 years. So I've lived in like communism and lived in communist China before it is like the the China now whereby is communism a hybrid of communist, still communist politically, but it is actually driven by a market mechanism of capitalism, right? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I would like to juxtapose that with socialism in France because before the pandemic hit, there's such a huge sentiment by a younger generation or pockets of political aisle that says that we should have equality, and rightfully so, in many sense of the word, equality of opportunities and giving people a level playing field, right? Even if you're handicapped, we give you as much as possible handicap to be on a level level playing field with someone who's not. However, when I'm in France, and I talk a lot about France because I go to a lot of social media groups in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, where I engage in debates behind the screens. You know, when you are behind the screen in comments, you can be really ruthless. People can really be a hater and a troll. Then really speak honesty. And I'm not saying that's bad. And I'm saying that's the truth because you really reveal that soul of people. And I want to go in there and hear and read what people write. And it can be dangerous. I subscribe to a lot of groups on different level, and I think it's good because it opens your eyes. Because when you put your face out there like us right now, we tend to have self-censorship. We tend to be politically correct because we don't want to be hated or trolled. That's the truth. But when you go into comments, when you try to scroll and people go behind the facade, right? They put on a fake name, a fake picture, and people tell the truth, no matter how bad it is, because you want to hear the truth. And people can be really, really extreme in both ends of the art, and there can be so much hate. And I'm talking about subscribing and following to Donald Trump's groups, okay, on one hand, and subscribing to the other aisle of the groups. And I'm not saying that they are right or they are wrong because people come with a different kind of context, and we got to hear them out. And it needs a kind of patience, the kind of like sit back and hear. Let's hear both sides debate it and shout it out. And you can have like people on one side hating on another side on both sides of the aisle. Now, let me just say this. On one side of the aisle, people wanted equality because they say that the rich, the 1% of the richest people, are holding on to 90% of the wealth of the rest of the world. So there is a lot of noise on the other side for the pandemic that says that it is time for us to equalize. Has the market mechanism of the world, capitalism of the world, driven to so far ahead that you've got the Elon Musk and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates of the world that holds 90% of the world's wealth. And this is something that came up with Warren Buffett and also Bill Gates, and that's why they are pledging their wealth to charity. They're not leaving any money to their children because they feel that it's going to the other end. So there's a one end of the voice that says that we need to have more equality in that sense. Free education, because there is another aspect of the people, they can never go up because they are in such a disadvantaged situation that they are marginalized. So there's another voice out there. So I'm reading on both pockets. And there's another pocket that says, right, if you give people a check in the letterbox, you take away their survival skill. And that's the end of the world. So I'm hearing to the other side, right? And I'm thinking myself here in Singapore, and I'm subscribing and following to very different groups, the Democrats and the Republicans, even though we're not going to go into politics. But I'm looking at it myself in Singapore, and we have the privilege in Singapore to be in a democratic society and yet have the right to choose, have the freedom to pray, have freedom of faith, freedom of religion, respect of faiths and of different colors and languages. I'm in such a privileged position, Richard. I can't tell you that, you know, there are people who tell me, my German friends who tell me, my German investor friends who say that you don't know Singapore, you're living in paradise, and you don't even know that. I've got people telling me that, and there are doctors, researchers and scientists. I'm looking at that, and I feel I'm in a such privileged position, and then I go to France. You want free healthcare, you want free education, You want a check when you're unemployed, they take your taxes up to 70%, right? And everything you buy and every time you get out of the house, you are taxed like crazy. And of course, this is the other side of the art that says that no, we should not have equality in that sense by giving people unemployment checks. Because when you give people unemployment checks, in one of the elements of equality is that you're taking them that survival skills of finding a job, you're taking that kind of survival instincts. The country is dead. And I look at a country like in Singapore versus France, whereby young people in a particular country stop looking for jobs. Because in France, if you can prove that you can't look for a job for 3 months, 3 months to 6 months, you are entitled to get an unemployment check of up to 500 euros, X amount of euros. And then that means you are able to live and in a on a subsistence level without looking for a job because their minimum wage is 1,100 euros. And if you need to go to 1,000 euros for a minimum wage, and then you need to work like crazy versus you've got a free check of 500. I just stay home, I just have my cafe, I don't spend a lot of money, I go to the beach, I can play my games, and that takes away that instinct of survival. And I look at a society like that whereby they demanded equality and they demanded the equality of the check. I find it on many fronts. I'm not saying it's good or bad because people do need help. The people do need help. Divorced mothers, widows, etc. And I'm not saying anything. I'm talking about some parts of scenarios I see. There's truth in both sides of the aisle. We want to have free education. We want to have a check that comes in. Um, and I do want to also have that, I should say, work-life balance. I want to have 3 days staying in a home and not going out. So I think the world is at a crossroads right now, Richard, and we are talking about the 4 day work week. And I'm saying that very loosely and giving out nuggets because we're talking about this equality of opportunities or equality of outcome. A country like France, they wanted equality of outcome more than equality of opportunities because they did not want to fight for capitalism. They didn't want to have globalism. They wanted to have a time whereby, which is rightfully so, they say that because I have got my social contract with the country, I am paying my taxes through the VATs, the value added tax anyway. So if I'm paying my tax in many, many other ways, I should deserve my check when I need it, and I should deserve my free education. I should deserve having my free healthcare. So free healthcare meaning going into the hospital and having a kidney changed for 200,000 euros and not paying a single dime. That's free healthcare in France, which I think we as humans do deserve. So I'm seeing that there is pros and cons in the topic that we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about, examples, right? Equality. But I would like to hear your take in your mind. What this stands out, you don't have to take my view because I'm really looking at some of these examples I'm living through. What you decipher out of this few words, equality versus prejudice, before we talk about prejudice in the second part
Yeah,
of my
I mean, staying
conversation.
on the equality, we'll get into the prejudice soon. But when it comes to things like the American Constitution, which I think is written with real, true universal values built into it, that ultimately equality is for all people. Um, Universal truths of respect should be for all people. opportunities should be available to all people. Uh, Treating people in the way that you would like to be treated yourself, quoting biblical scripture of loving your neighbor as thyself. So looking at a high level of human decency and equality is something that I think should be built into to all of us. And yet, at the same time, we're not equal, are we? Men and women are different, and this is an area that has caused all sorts of issues in the past between equality between men and women. And again, there are areas that, of course, things like equal pay and equal rights, for me, is should be an absolute given. If you're doing the same job to the same ability, um, as a human, irrespective of whether we're male or female, we have human rights and should be respected for that. But I think at the same time, we have to recognize that there are differences, and the way that men and women think and operate is different. And we can either see that as something that can be conflict or complementary. And I think, sometimes if we look at the differences between men and women, again, biblically speaking, um, men and women were created actually to complement each other, and that's coming from scripture. So, on one side, when it comes to, you know, whether it's male chauvinism or extreme feminism, I think we have to recognize that there are differences, um, and that those differences can be complementary, but there are basic human needs and values that go across all cultures, all genders, all ethnic groups that we should be mindful and respectful of. So I'm talking, at a very high level, but then that starts to then filter down to everyday aspects of life, and how does that basic philosophy of equality then filter into the way you operate your life, how you view other people, how your values and beliefs have been shaped over time. So, on one side, yes, equality should be there for all people, but I think we should also recognize that there are differences, and in some ways celebrate those differences because they do complement each other.
Yeah, and when you talked about the differences, I thought I like to bring up this aspect. Even though when I'm talking about friends, and people do have a kind of understanding that this is a very chauvinistic society, snobbish. They have this notoriety, and also anti-globalism, anti-capitalism. They say it themselves. But however, people will be surprised when they go into a country like that and you sink into a society, because we're talking about respect, right? We're talking about, like in Singapore, there are pockets of Singaporeans on this continuum, uh, people who do respect diversity, but there is another group of people who do not. Just like in any country, there's always this bell curve. Um, I like to talk about in France, people have this understanding that this is like a very chauvinistic country. But if you were to get to really know each individual, the country versus the individual, I would like to say, it is a country that respects a lot of diversity if you observe that. Because when I was in France, Richard, I like to quote examples because it's such these are experiences that is unforgettable that I would like to share with the international audience and yourself. When I was there, even like 7 years ago, more than seven, it's almost like 9 years because I forgot about the 2 years in pandemic. There are ads and commercials that feature Chinese girls in French commercials. And I'm surprised because you're talking about French makeup in a local context, French
Hmm.
apparel for women. They have got black people. They've got Chinese looking. I mean, Chinese looking as in they could be from China, they could be from Asia, from Vietnam. Chinese looking, Asian looking girls, black women, and they made sure that the ads do cover that. And I'm really surprised. And I'm talking about brands like Yves Rocher, which I buy a lot from because they're good, they're Main Street. And I go to their websites and they will have big billboards featuring Chinese girls and French girls. Which at that time, even like 9 years ago, I was pretty pleasantly shocked because they didn't mind putting up a Chinese girl with a white girl on their billboards and not thinking that the Chinese girl would set back their sales. You know what I'm trying? I'm speaking the truth, Richard. I'm speaking the
Hmm.
truth because there are voices out there that do not want to put colored people out there in the media because they say that that will set back the number of viewership. But that didn't happen. Even Air France, the ad for Air France, they had Chinese girls. So I was really quite shocked. I had the Chinese girls bring up into the air, the Air France, and they were sitting on the chair and they kick off their shoes, So of course there is a business reason behind because they were targeting a particular group of audience, right? The big spenders, isn't
Hmm.
it? But I'm saying that I think they have willingly moved away from that kind of mindset that it must be the whites on the screens at all times. So they gave opportunities to Asian models. So I say equality of opportunities. They gave opportunities to the blacks because you see black girls on the billboards out there. And of course, now you do see more common, like 10 years later after the pandemic, it's more common, right? But
Yeah.
I'm talking about that time. So I'm just saying that even though, so I'm just trying to say that it is very dangerous to kind of have this generalization to say that this society they're chauvinistic or this person is chauvinistic or they're socialistic. I think it's very dangerous to label people now or groups of people now. And that's what I found. If you were to say that this country or this group of people, they are the rightist or they're the leftists or they are the Democrats or Republicans or they are, I find it really dangerous to label people right now. Because within that, you will see people who embraces that or that there is a blurring of that kind of definition before. Because we're moving into a world whereby people are amalgamating without themselves knowing because technology has made it so. So that's something that I would like to bring up to you, Richard. Something really, really interesting that I see in a country where people label it as, a really highly chauvinistic country.
Well, I think you're starting to move from equality to potential prejudice in what you're saying, in that it's can be a slippery slope and a fine balance whereby we start making generalizations
Yeah.
about groups of people or individuals based on past experiences and past beliefs. And I think when we start to look at what shapes our beliefs, which ultimately shapes how we think and potentially, whether conscious or subconscious, our prejudices. So, where does it start from? And ultimately, it's our thoughts that really shape us as people. And I think one of the key things that I've shared with my children is be careful what you expose yourself to, because that will have a big influence on how you think and what you absorb into your mind and
Yeah.
what values you'll start to take on. So whether it's through social media, TV influencers, whether it's other significant people in your life, parents, friends, peer groups. uh, these can be shaped by culture, by environment. I mean, the things that make up our personalities um, ultimately shape us into who we are today. And when we look at what do we allow to us to be exposed to, I think we have to be very, very careful, because there is a lot of media bombardment, not always uh, sound and not always correct. And we need to have the wisdom to be able to filter as much as we realistically can truth from, fake news and fiction, or bad or poor values. And if you think, as a child evolves and goes through maturing to an adult, depending on how these thoughts have been shaped by influential people or media throughout their life, can start to strengthen a value and a belief. And I think I mentioned this in one of our previous uh, shows, that I like this analogy that Tony Robbins uses, the famous personal guru and self development, and he gives this image that if you imagine a tabletop being the image of a value or a belief, and that every time something reinforces that value or belief, a leg is put under that tabletop to reinforce the strength of that belief. And every time you see something on TV, social media, reinforced by a friend, parent, teacher, it's strengthening that belief. And if you are brought up in a culture, society that continues to reinforce that belief, it can become very powerful. And if we take it to an extreme, it could be radicalized, and really, when we look at radicalization of values, particularly if those have been distorted from universal truths, it really is what can cause extreme end of prejudices and hate at the end of the day. So I think we have to be very careful as individuals and as parents. How do we shape our children? How do we shape ourselves? How do we make a conscious choice of what are we going to let into our minds? What are we going to make sure that we filter out of our lives, so that hopefully our beliefs and values are really built on sound truths, and that we are, born um, with equal rights and deserve equal respect, irrespective of our background, creed, ethnic group, race, language, foods that we eat. I think we are blessed here in Singapore that it is a melting pot for people who have not traveled here. It's really made up of multiple groups, particularly Chinese, Malay, Indian, but also a real mixture of other nationalities from all over the world. I think there's something like 500,000 permanent residents here that are from many different parts of the world. And so we are blessed with having a multicultural society and a government that does a very good job in trying to create that harmony. And they do things from neighborhoods are integrated so that there is a balance between different ethnic groups. So
Integration.
these are integrated from a young age. I mean, my children have gone to local schools here. My wife is Japanese. My children are Eurasian. They go to local schools where they have friends from
Integration.
all different races. But I think from a young age, having been exposed to these different ethnic groups, that they just see it as normal.
Yes.
It's a norm. It's not like if you're living in a country that is heavily dominated by a certain ethnic group, and that if you are outside of that, you are seen as very different. That I think that's
Sure.
a blessing of Singapore, that we have a multicultural society, and from the day that people are born, they're exposed to living, schooling, working in an integrated society, which helps to break down those racial barriers. We will never be perfect. There will always be some level of racial tension, but I think in Singapore it's done a very good job of managing it, and potentially other parts of the world could learn from it.
Yeah, Richard, you brought up a very, very important point. Integration. My question is, besides integration, is there any other way to kind of preempt prejudice, preempt before it even exists?
I think one of the challenges is that if we are all truly honest with ourselves, it is impossible not to be prejudiced in some way. I like to think of myself as a universal citizen, being born and raised in the UK, but fortunate to travel around many parts of the world, live in many parts of the world, married to Japanese, Eurasian children. And in many respects, one would call me a hypocrite that if I didn't have an open mind to racial differences, then, why did I marry an Asian? I got, Eurasian kids. But I still think that it is impossible to be absolutely 100% not prejudiced because we do build up opinions, whether we're conscious or unconscious of it. We all do it, and I just think we have to be careful again about um, is that belief really based on correct sound truth, or is it something that has been twisted or warped along the way, maybe because I've had a personally let me give an example. Actually, when I was backpacking around the world, I remember when I was traveling for a week or so, traveling with an Aussie guy, and dare I say, this Aussie guy just all he wanted to do was drink and get drunk, and for a week it was a nightmare. It was a disaster. But and for a while, it tainted my perception of Australian, excuse me. But then about a year or two later, again, I was at work and there was an Australian guy that I got to know, and he just again he kind of just. I actually remember having this conversation. This is going back over 30 years, and I said, "My goodness, I'm so glad I've met you because you've restored my faith in Australians." But when I look back in that scenario, what I'm taking one person, and it could have been a different nationality, but this one person was such a
One
heavy drinker that it
experience,
was like
yes.
so I was instilling my views because of one bad
Yeah.
experience on of one person and labeling um, an entire nation, dare I say, based on that one bad experience. And I think it's so easy to fall into that trap
Yeah.
that we have a bad experience or
Yeah.
we view people because they do things differently from us, and we just start labeling all people that way. And I think we can all be guilty of that. And I raise my hand and have been guilty in the past. And I think we need to, give ourselves a pinch sometimes because we have to realize that we cannot label that all people from one country are going to have that sort of personality trait.
Yeah, and I like your point, both points about integration and also being very, very mindful not to have this projection, that okay, this person is going to like you're going to generalize the whole group. I think that's
Yeah.
something that we should be. It should be part of the school curriculum, right? Not to be prejudiced. I'd like to also echo what you say about integration, and also raise another possible method of preempting prejudice before it happens. Integration. I'm not sure if you remember. I did mention that I was teaching. I was a lecturer in polytechnics in Singapore before I got married, and I would say this group students from a particular country. Because you've got Singapore is, I mean, we've got students all over the world coming here. We've got people coming from Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries. We've even got a lot of Europeans going to the universities. So when I was teaching, ladies and gentlemen, I've got this group of students who are coming in. If you are one of them, and if you're listening, this is something that I would like to remind some of my friends or some of my ex-students right now. I'm still, I was a student counselor in the Nanyang Technological University for one of the engineering faculties. Um, when you've got a group of students coming into a country, a school, now this is, for example, in Singapore, you've got a group of students coming into here, and they start to create their own cliques. You've got two students becoming three, becoming four, then becoming 10, and they speak their own language, and they move together during recess time. They go to the canteens, they go to the libraries, they study together in groups. You could extrapolate that to the whole society. But what happens is when you've got groups of more than two and you are not speaking a language that other people understand, number one, you are segregating yourself unconsciously from other people because you are telling the message that I don't want to be part of you. Now that's really dangerous because you don't even know that. Because you're sending the message, it's called the group dynamics. You're telling people that I am different, I don't want to speak your language, I want to go in my groups, I don't want to be with you. So this is my take as a teacher before, and I told the students, don't do that. If you want, you must invite, be someone to embrace, reach out your hand to tell the people, hi, I am from this country, I am so and so. I would like to be your friend. Invite the locals to be part of your group. And locals, likewise, please do so. I am so and so. I live here. I'm from Singapore. Reach out your hand and you embrace. And it is such, to me, it is such a group dynamics that it must be taught in schools because we are taught in the university um, business psychology, group dynamics in a business setting, right? Now we must teach that in school, or we must promote that in school. You must embrace and reach out your hand, and you must learn the local culture and the local language with a conscientious effort, because you are telling people, I welcome you. Which other way, right? Either you're coming to the country or you are welcoming someone else. I think that is so important. You can extrapolate that in the business sector. You can extrapolate that in the shopping mall. You can extrapolate that in, I don't know, whatever sector you can tell, whichever industry you are in, if you're in office. You've got different nationalities. You don't want the Japanese to be sticking to the Japanese. You don't want the Americans to be sticking to the American bankers. You know what I'm trying to say? You have to embrace each other, and I think that starts when you are younger. Because when you're younger, like your children, when they're in school, they're exposed to different students because we are in a privileged situation in Singapore. You've got different countries coming in. You've got the Vietnamese, you've got the Cambodians, you've got people from Burma, you've got the Indonesians, you've got the Malaysians, you've got the Thais, you've got the Laos, you've got the Indians, you've got the Bangladeshis. I think it is important, of course, as a host country, to say that, hey, where are you from? Etc. And I know that it's difficult because this is such a small country. You are saying that they're coming into your face. You're coming into your space. They're taking on to your inch that you have so little of already. That's something that I would like to say, that it is difficult. But I would like to also say that to the other side, reach out if you are a foreign student, you are a foreigner coming to into a country, it could be, it doesn't have to be Singapore. If you're going to France, you're going to Germany, if you're a foreigner, you say, hi, I'm so and so. Create friendship, amalgamate or integrate. I like to say that because my self experience, Richard, and to the international audience is that when I was in France, when I moved into an apartment of French who may have never met, an Asian looking person, myself and my husband before, the first thing I did was I gave cards and I wrote in French and I slipped it under the door. I said that, hey, I'm from Singapore. I'm going to be here for 2 years because I'm here for professional business purpose, but you don't have to divulge confidential details. This is my name. I'm trying to learn French, and I gave a chocolate, and I put it at the door. And during Christmas, I gave flowers, and I think they really appreciated that because I got roses and I got chocolates myself. They sent them to me. And I'm talking about deep part of French that is in the rural suburbs. And I consciously wanted to do that because I live the principle in a diverse culture in Singapore. You've got to embrace and you've got to reach out. And if I told that to my students, I got to live it. And I did that. And you know what? They love me. They give me kisses. And they always give me gossips about the other French neighbors. So you know what? I'm just trying to tell everyone out there. You've got to embrace. We've got to break down that prejudice. And I think because of that, and I'm not saying that it's a great thing to do, but I'm saying that it's a small thing that we can't do. And because it's a small thing that we can't do, I think it's a step forward. And for them to know the first Asian or to know the first Singaporean, I think it's a big deal. Because if we embrace that mentality that we have a role to play in this globalized world, we walk out, we are in a different state of mind, Richard.
Sure. I mean, it's great to hear, what you were doing with your students. I couldn't agree more that, by integrating, we're going to realize that although there are differences in the way we look, how we dress, the language we speak, the food we eat, fundamentally there are so many things that unite us as well that we all as humans are seeking and looking for. But yes, it does take a bit of effort. And, I feel sorry, having lived in Singapore for 20 odd years, that it's not uncommon that an expat will come over, let's say from the UK where I'm from. They'll join the British club, they'll have a circle of British friends,
Yeah.
and they might spend 2 or 3 years here and really not integrate into local society. And it's like, well,
And
if you if
enjoying
you
that, right?
yeah, if you've
There's so
moved to
much
Asia,
enjoyment. Yeah.
if you've moved to Singapore and Asia, you know, why not take advantage of the new experiences that have presented it, to you? But it does take,
Salute.
I think it takes a certain personality, and it does take a little bit of effort to get out of your comfort zone and consciously
Exactly,
re
exactly.
reach over and
Absolutely.
build those bridges. But
Absolutely, Richard.
I think at the end of the
Hats
day,
off, hats off to you, and hats off, kudos to you, Richard. Kudos to you. You don't represent every Brit. You don't. Okay, I'm just gonna tell everyone. Richard, he's exemplary, great father, great humanitarian. Why so? Because I think when you have reached person a level of understanding, a level of, I would use the word loosely, enlightenment, right? Or that level of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, you have that kind of enlightenment or understanding. You start to see the world a different way, but a lot of people have not. Then will someone be able to be like you, Richard? And hats off to you, Richard. Totally hats off to you. And that's why the second part I wanted to say is traveling is so important. And someone I heard over a podcast they say we must make it mandatory for people to travel out of their country. It is a human right. We
Sure.
must, it is a human right to get to know other people from other parts of the world. You're going to be a diametrically different person, Richard.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, I've said it before that the one of the greatest things that shaped my thoughts and beliefs and has ultimately led me to live in
Yeah,
places like Hong Kong and Singapore is,
yeah,
I backpacked around Europe twice by the age of 21. I backpacked around the world by the age of 24. And I see myself as being very fortunate that I was in a position to be able to do that. But I also made it happen as well. I worked hard to save the money, and then I had the personality that said, look, I'm not having to dependent on somebody else to travel with me. I backpacked around the world. I met up with people 75% of the time I was backpacking around the world. And it opened up my eyes to the fact that, yes, I was very fortunate and blessed in the background and upbringing I had, but I realized that just because I was brought up in the UK through that society and through a middle class, well educated family, um, doesn't necessarily mean I see the world as it is and the way it is. And that by traveling, we start to see the world through other people's eyes and other people's experiences and realize that, you know, the world is seen with a different pair of lenses depending on where you've been brought up, your
yeah.
background, your
Exactly, exactly.
experiences. And so
I,
I've actually made a conscious choice to live in places like Hong Kong and Singapore. And at the same time, I've been given the opportunity. Why? Partly because I enjoy living in a multicultural society, when I can go out and meet and greet and eat foods from all over the world. That's far more exciting than eating and meeting the same people from the same part of the world day in, day out. So I think you can see it as, is it something that helps you grow, makes a more interesting and exciting life and experience, or is it better to stay in a comfort zone of surrounding, yourself with similar people who think the same, who look the same, who eat the same, who speak the same, or surround yourself with people from different walks of life
yeah,
and
yeah.
hopefully have a slightly more holistic view of the world.
Yeah, and I would think that, making it a mandatory or part of the school curriculum for students to go to third world countries is so important. Going to a third world country, I mean, even to your neighboring countries, it's a must. Looking at, talking to the people, going to the orphanage, and I would think that prejudice occurs when you feel you are better. What's the definition?
Mhm.
Classism still do exist. We don't see it here. I mean, of course, in Europe, you've got the aristocrats. You've got the. It's really clear in certain European countries, right? The rich are the filthy rich, because they've got the hereditary of the land, the horses, etc. And but I would say that if that part of the world, people who are like the Bill Gates, or we say that the upper strata of the world, or people who are of a particular status of the world, they do make an effort. The Elon Musk of the world, they do make an effort. I would think that the world has a chance. The world is moving. It could go both ways. I don't know. It could both ways. It could go nationalistic. A lot of countries could go there, to because of life is going to be a struggle from now because of inflation, economy, etc. But it could go the other way too. Because we're talking about opening up dialogues. We're talking about technology being democratized. So it could go both ways. But I would think that a leadership is important. The third thing I would like to say, just as much as the CEO of a company, you've run your own company before, the CEO of a company sets the tonality, the culture, the climate, the social climate within an organization. So does a political leader. So does a business leader. They can set the tonality, the culture, the climate of the country. And I would think that, the Justin Trudeau's of the world, like in Canada, they make a difference. They accept a lot of diversity. They themselves coming up from the generation of a diverse background. I would think that. What do you think, Richard? Which part? How do you think that the world is like? It's gonna be. We are at the crossroads. I would think that we are at the crossroads. Every time we say that we are at the crossroads, we are.
I think when we look out, throughout history, you know, dare I say, we live in a broken world, and there are always going to be challenges. Um, and are we going to be, as individuals, a light in that world, or are we going to be, darkness in that world? And I think that's for each of us to choose. How are we going to shape the world that we live in? How are we going to impact our sphere of influence? And,
Yeah,
are we going to do that in a positive way that contributes uh, in a positive way to society? Or are we going to do that in a negative way and complain and gripe about, things?
exactly,
So I think
exactly.
each of us has a personal decision, and we
Yes.
can all, if we all shone a light in our lives, well, hopefully it would be a better world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, having said that, from the top down approach, right? You have a top down approach. You've got the leadership who's going to change the climate, policies, right? And that's how Singapore is, because it started off with a set of policies that we should integrate in an estate. The number of people, the Malays, the Chinese, the Indians, the Eurasians, the number of people must have this ratio. You don't let them an enclave as a group. That was the policy. However, like what you say, I totally agree with you. On an individual level, we have got to look in the mirror, the man in the mirror, like what Michael Jackson says. What I do, and what I did as a teacher before, I made it a point that, to let the students know that they must embrace. If they are a foreign student, you have got to reach out and not wait for people to reach out. You've got to make the first move, because if you wait for the cloud to come home, it may never happen. No,
Absolutely. Yeah.
on a second level, I do think everyone has the ability on an individual level to affect change, just like what we're doing now. You can reach out to your neighbor, right? I've got an Indian family before. I wanted to make sure to welcome them. How are you? You're from India. And I did have an Indian trainer when I was taking my postgraduate diploma that I just completed a month ago. I wanted to make sure that if he does come to Singapore, he can have tea with me. The door is always open. Um, because politically on the media, you do know the bad news gets out first and they run really fast, right? But the good news stays at home.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
so important for us who are conscious of this. It gives us an added responsibility because of education, because of a social position, or because of a social position, not high or low, but where we can reach. What I'm trying to say, social reach. I think to make that balance felt. For example, for me, when there's a bad news that goes out there, I want to make sure I make it known to. For example, this is just an example, right? Recently there was a news in Singapore that says that a particular race didn't want to sit with a particular race in the train, in the mass rapid transit in the train, because they wanted to switch places, they wanted to move. I felt sorry because that was the same thing my Indian friend told me on the podcast.
Right.
Right? He says that nobody wanted to sit with me. What's wrong with me? And he's a doctor.
Right.
But I made sure the one time recently that I made sure I sat with someone who was different, and I thanked the person for giving me the seat. So I would think that it may not make a huge impact in the media because good news stays at home or good news stays with you, but bad news stays travels around the world. I would think that small little effort like that, I would think it made a difference to me, or at least it made a difference to the person. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to quote Mahatma Gandhi, become the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And I think it starts with each and every one of us, to look in the mirror and truly question our values, and are they shaped on universal truths of respecting our fellow man. And if we've got uh, pride or prejudice, which we all have elements of, can we try to filter these out and be a better person, to our neighbor at the end of the day.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's a great talk with you, and I like the way that we juxtapose our examples. And one last tip for anyone out there, and if you do see a new colleague coming to the office, invite the person for lunch, invite the person for tea. And if you do see a student who is different, invite the person for recess. I think that's the best we can do and not make the person feel out of place.
Sure. Great.
Thank you so much, Richard. Would you like to wrap up for the next 15 seconds?
No, I think, it's a great topic, obviously a very sensitive
Oh,
one,
great.
but as I say, I think, as a fellow human, let's be a light in the world. We have a choice of how we conduct our lives. We have a choice of what we let into our minds. Choose wisely and be a light in the world.
Richard, I am so fortunate, and I'm not saying just because you are spending time with me here. I am truly fortunate, and I think people who have tuned in, by the way, that's what I love about life because Annette Wittenberger, the retired lieutenant colonel of the United States of America Army, who has led 8 missions, including Afghanistan and Iraq. She just tuned in and she gave a love thumbs up and a love to our show. Great, great.
Well,
Thank
thank
you so
you.
much, Annette. You know, I love for us to have our talk again for the morning show, Richard. After the season break, in another 2 weeks, I do have Christine. Got to get the full name right. I do have Christine. She's gonna be one of our co-hosts, a great lady, Christine Adams from Memphis, Tennessee, deep part of America, deep in the center of America. I'd like to welcome Christine. A shout out to you, and also a shout out to Annette. My friends in the Facebook group, my personal Facebook group. Thank you for being with us, and she's going to be one of the co-hosts for the morning show, State of Our World. Richard, what a wonderful 1.5 hours, and thank you for being patient to wait for me to start this show late. I think it's intense. Our talk is intense. We do have nuggets here and there. There's food for thought. Definitely the conversation should go on. This is a start. People should start talking. And I think, like people, you and I, when we talk about this in the social media, people tuning in, I think there are people who will be surprised, Richard, about our topic. will be people who are surprised, and I think people will be surprised at you, and then people are getting to know you, Richard.
Good. Well, again, if we can shape and hopefully have a better world, then I think we've done a good job.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, it's 12 a.m. right now. So it's 12:01 a.m. It is a Tuesday morning, and it is very early morning in America. Welcome to the show, and I hope that you tune in with us tomorrow. Me too, with Colette Laurie Galea from USA, California, tomorrow, 10:30 Singapore PM, Singapore PM 10:30, which is 10:30 a.m. American Eastern Standard Time. So stay tuned with us tomorrow. And today I've got Richard Christopher Lowe here. Thank you so much, Christopher. I'm really grateful from my heart that you are open, honest, authentic, and talking about your philosophy, sharing with the world, and also sharing with your values. I think this is what is important, and also a great exemplary of humanity. So thank you, Richard. Salute, Richard.
Well, thank you again for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Right, we'll talk to you, and you'll see Richard again for our next season. Bye.